Hey there, welcome to another episode where we dive deep with local experts, international guests into their relationship with food. You're about to hear from Kori Leigh Hagel as she shares her journey, and I think you're going to love this. She holds a real kind of deep presence and reverence in her relationship to food. She talks about the story of a food, and I think there's some real keys and clues in there for you and I to develop and deepen our relationship with food. Oftentimes we can get stuck in the world of kind of the macro and the micronutrients, come at it too scientifically, or even, when we're in that dark space with food, overeating or binging and emotional eating. Kori really offers us some guidance and a light through that. So I think you're going to love her concept and relationship of the story of food and the kind of the deeper connection that she brings. And she's had a lot of experience throughout the years of, her own personal journey, also studying and working professionally, not only in kind of, conventional field. She talks about working with Jenny Craig, as well as the work that she does now, which is a lot more kind of earth-based, holistic-based, and this idea of self-care. So take a listen, post any questions or comments, and please share out the interview and enjoy. Hey, welcome everyone. I have with me on the call Kori Leigh Hagel. Welcome.
Hey, Malcolm.
Right on. Well, thanks for joining us. And, probably I've had a few people that are just joining us, have never seen this show, couples that have maybe watched a few. The format, the flow of this is we're just going to have a nice informal conversation. We're going to explore your journey, your relationship to food and nutrition. And from that, we're going to pull out all kinds of gems and wisdoms that those that are listening can certainly apply. So definitely you're awesome. You're rocking the food realm. You're making elixirs. You're having fun. My guess is that it wasn't always that way, right? Yeah, it's been, other than that, from where you are at right now, you're certainly an inspiration, what you're doing currently, but what I'd love to do is share the backstory of where you've come from and your journey and those kind of key lessons to get you where you've got. So let's just start from there. Let's just dive right in and hear about your journey with food and nutrition.
Okay. That's a huge question.
Right, for sure.
Yeah. So, I've always been fascinated with food and the mind-body connection. I remember from a really young age really loving that. I grew up in a family that, I don't know, my mom was really healthy. I always thought of my Grammy as a witch, like a green witch. She was always, like back in her day, concocting bizarre crafts and things that were way beyond her time. And and I remember being in grade 7 and studying microorganisms and swearing off any form of meat at that time. It just really freaked me out. And so I became a vegetarian. And my mom let me do it on my own. She said, you can do it, but I'm not going to cook for you. And then, like similar to your story, I just became a carbohydrate-tarian and just had a lot of carbohydrates and just was nutritionally imbalanced. And so I went back to eating meat. And where else do I go with this? So then I had always had this interest in food and in the mind-body connection. And then we fast forward to finishing high school and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I studied nutrition at SAIT. And right before I went into SAIT and discovered that I really loved food, I'd spend my time making, nutrition programs for people. Specifically, I remember a family member that had diabetes, and I was really fascinated in what food could do with that. And so I studied nutrition. And then from there, I worked at Jenny Craig, actually, in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And I was really interested. I learned that I became fascinated and in love with the one-on-one coaching aspect. I found it very interesting that in that particular program, you get a menu and food, and it's kind of a foolproof program. But yeah, nobody was following it. People don't follow it. They just don't do it. And so that really pushed me into life coaching, into understanding kind of a little bit of the mind and spirituality behind food. And then from there, I think it was really when I turned 27 and I entered into my dark night of the soul. This is where I think a lot of my real, true life lessons began. um, with food and with spirit and with understanding what a healthy relationship looks like. And just, it got really, 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 really dark. And from there, I had left a really abusive relationship and I went into therapy and I had just sort of fallen apart at the seams. And it was in that time that I went back to school to study holistic nutrition and that I was really starting to dive into therapy and putting these two worlds together and really understanding what the power of food was when we had spiritual deficiencies and we were lost emotionally. So it was in that time that I went to holistic nutrition school and I discovered that I had food sensitivities to gluten, dairy, and egg. And those sensitivities were manifesting for me as depression and anxiety and all sorts of really bizarre nervous system imbalances, which before I didn't even know that was a thing. You think food sensitivity equals like a rash or diarrhea or something like that. And then in that time, I was also really diving into the realm of therapy and self-care and the rituals of self-care and learning how to navigate my way through the darkness and how to find the divinity in darkness. So that's kind of what I put all of everything I do is into this divinity and darkness piece of being able to reside in the places that we're at and find the nourishment where we are rather than numbing from suppressing and running towards something different, really being able to surrender into the place and nourish our body, mind, and soul with food and surrender.
Wow. Yeah, quite a story. There's lots we can jump off there. Let's start with, you mentioned, being in that dark space and food was kind of there for you. How did you find that balance? I know a lot of people will kind of go to, food for that comfort eating and that can often even not be a healthy relationship. How did you find that balance of kind of, as you say, being in that dark night of your soul, but having food as kind of a light? I mean, shall I call it that? Or was it that? And how did you keep that balance of not getting kind of lost in food or overeating or that?
That's a really good question. And yeah, I would totally call it a light. I don't know, something happened in those days where something shifted. I had a long history of eating disorders and a long history of counting calories and just an unhealthy relationship with food. And something in my dark night of the soul shifted for me. And it had a lot to do with coming to the light cellar and walking amongst these plants. And I don't know, in holistic nutrition, we didn't even really learn about a lot of the stuff that you guys carry at the light cellar. There's just something really spoke deeply to me. And I remember this one specific day eating an apple, and it was just a very bizarre experience that I bit into this apple and I was driving and I had to pull over my car because something about it hit me as just overwhelmingly beautiful. And it was the flavor of the apple and the way the apple looked and this mind-blowing concept that this apple was a seed. And then the seed turned into an apple, which turned into nourishment. And my body just knew how to use it. And then my body would eliminate what it didn't need and use what it did. And then earth would make more apples. And I just started to find a lot of inspiration and connection in food. It reminded me that it was safe to surrender because there was a purpose to this whole thing, that a seed will turn into its potential. And I was no different. And so I spent a lot of my time finding different foods that would match my mood. And medicinal mushrooms were really big. I really, really loved crafting with reishi. And I would learn that this particular food would help alleviate some form of depression, or it would help to increase my spirituality. And so it was through that I then started taking them into the kitchen and crafting a potion and then drinking it in reverence, knowing that this plant medicine was meant to help me do this journey. And it's bizarre because before, you could fast forward or rewind 5 years and I was making Ichiban with broccoli in it. I was not crafting this stuff. I hated being in the kitchen.
Right.
Something shifted in my relationship with the connection of food.
Yeah, that's cool. And what I heard you say is with that Apple experience, you found deeper meaning there, right? And I think a lot of times when a lot of us get into kind of these emotional eating, patterns or habits, we're in this kind of dark space and we just want to like stuff carbohydrates or candy or whatever chips, like down our throat. There isn't that deep sacred reverence, right? Like
Sure.
the food itself comes from, other than the best place, like what you've described is, relationship with natural foods, right? And like you say, like medicinal mushrooms, things like reishi that are imbued with deep sacredness and reverence and that have this cultural history and that are known to kind of help uplift our vibration. So, anyone listening, I think that's a really great takeaway is if we're in that space, food can be a light, but we got to think about the quality and the essence of it. And I love how you say you had that experience deeply kept connecting to an apple. I mean, for you and I and many others that are listening, a lot of us that have studied food and nutrition, and I mean, I remember just like getting overwhelmed with, you become obsessive around like, nutrients and calories and this and that. And, really, I think the last final frontier is actually truly just deeply like connecting to food, enjoying it, going into its essence. And that's where the real nourishment comes.
For sure. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I love this idea of the potion, and as you're describing it, it brought up this image of your grandmother, and I think there's probably some traces there, right? And I think there's a theme happening for a lot of us where we're reconnecting to potentially what our ancestors did, right? This traditional kind of sacred food preparation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the idea of the witch, and brewing up these potions, and that's really cool. I love that understanding of food and knowing its dynamics and its energy, and eventually, how long did it take you? Do you feel like you said, previously, right? It was Ichiban and broccoli. Now to this really deep understanding of food and its essence. How long has it taken you to get there? How have you gone about developing that wisdom, which is then translated into what seems now to be more of like an intuitive kind of effortless, I'll say almost even magical approach to creating your food?
In this point in my existence, I'm starting to see that this seed was always there, that this was part of what my path was, and there's a blossoming in it. But for a long time, yeah, the food was this calorie counting, studying. I think the magic, the intuitive magic, really started happening over, I don't know, probably the past 4 years, really.
Mm-hmm.
I studied it my whole life, but formally started studying it 13 years ago, and I've worked with clients for that entire time. And it really didn't turn into this more magic piece personally until about 4 years ago, but then in professionally and crafting with other people, it's really been in the past probably 3 years. So
Right.
4 years ago, I kind of like discovered this, and then in the past 3 years, it's been, yeah, just blossoming even further.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember you spoke at one of our open houses at the Light Cellar, and you talked about food having a story, and I really love that, and I want you to kind of share a little bit more on that, how you view food and what you see and that story that comes to mind with food.
Okay. So I think we traditionally look at food as, well, not necessarily traditionally, but one of the ways that we really respect food and love food is for its nutritive properties and how it nourishes the body, and how many calories it has and how much vitamin C it has and that type of thing. But
Yeah.
that's only one aspect of food, I think. I think there's an energetic component to food with the color that it is and what it can offer to us on an energy chakra style level. But there's also a story and a potential that I really, really love. And any food that we find, anything on the planet that we find, has a story. And so this particular food will tell you what continent it grew on, how much water was there, what sort of pollinators. It'll tell you its story. And so we're not just eating a food, we're actually eating a story that happened, that had, it was affected by all these other different elements, and it took the whole universe, the conspiracy of the universe, in order to create this story to have this food be blossomed. And then that leads into this idea of the potential as well. And I remember it was about a year ago, I dove into studying botany. I wanted to take a small botany course on, basically I just wanted to grow a garden because I have a respect for food, but I just don't have a very good green thumb. And I I started learning about a biennial plant, and so something like a carrot or an artichoke. They in their first year they grow their carbohydrate. So the carrot, that actual carrot is the carbohydrate, and then the second year they will eat that carbohydrate to flour. And it really hit me that even with the vast amount that I know about food, I didn't know some of these things, like an artichoke floured. I didn't know it was like part of the milk thistle family and it literally turned into a flower. But it doesn't turn into a flower because we eat them. We eat the potential of that plant. And so
Right.
it gives up its ability to flower in order to feed our human body so that we can flower. And so we're eating an energy, we're eating nutrients, but we're also eating a potential and we're eating a story. And so it creates such a huge amount of reverence for me when I think about food.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm really seeing this as a doorway for those that are listening that maybe are struggling with the relationship or food, or even like I mentioned before, as you were saying, if we can be stuck in that world of calories, vitamins, minerals, nutrients, which I know you'd said oftentimes I get tripped up on. How do we describe that? Is that the traditional approach? Traditional, I would see as more kind of that, like the ancient. It's of different cultures and traditions, and it's more conventional. Right? It's like this is the modern kind of like view and conventional frame of reference, born out of science, really, right? Like science can tell us, what are the nutrients in a food, and also science can tell us, to a degree through studies, what are the effects of a food and of those nutrients. And I love this kind of window to go deeper into that reverence, deeper into that essence, and I think that's a real key for a lot of us to help heal our relationship to food, help heal and fully like nourish and nurture ourselves. I mean, you and I and those listening, and we were so blessed to have access to the best food ever. I mean, it just can't get any better, really. I mean, it can and it will. It's getting better all the time, but it's amazing, right? And I feel like, I know for myself, I hit a point where it's like, okay, I was vegetarian like you for a long time. I really struggled with it. And once I kind of transitioned out of that, there was still a bit of a kind of a missing hole and a gap, and it was just coming to that level of reverence and having that deeper connection to food. So I love that idea of the story, right? And I think we can all connect to that in any which way, like you say, whether it's that potential of it becoming a flower or the story of the environment. I love how you shared that too, and a lot of folks will be familiar with that terminology and that idea of the terroir, right? And wine, we think of how the terroir, the place, and everything that grows around it, and the soil and the moisture content, that all influences, the story, and therefore the flavor, and therefore the nutrients.
For sure.
Yeah, it's fun. I remember Ron Teagarden, I heard him speak one time, and he was talking about ginseng. And he's like, I want the most gnarly ginseng. He's like, I don't want like the nice, beautiful, picture-perfect one. He's like, I want like the one that's had the hardest life, that's been chewed on and beaten up and this and that. And he's like, because, a ginseng like that has lived a tough life, and how it adapts to its tough life is chemically, right? It can't run away. Doesn't have some of those same, adaptations or defense mechanisms that we do as humans. Plants, their defense mechanism, their communication, their language, it's all chemical, biochemical. So the more that it develops, to say protect itself, some of the most potent herbs in the world live in really extreme environments because they have to adapt to that environment. And as they develop those, and we take them in, it helps us adapt. We can utilize some of that same biochemistry in our bodies. So
I love that because I really think it ties into when we're using food as a vice, when we're numbing out. And we can take that example from the ginseng as well, the most gnarly one that's had the toughest life, that's going to pass those amazing adaptive qualities to us. That's what not scratching the itch does for our human soul. Right. So when we don't binge or we don't reach for our vice that eases the pain, and we're brave like the ginseng, and we become these gnarly, amazing human beings, we transform, we enter into this dark place, and it catapults us into amazing places if we can just have the courage not to scratch the itch. So it totally goes into this whole realm of using food as a vice.
Yeah, for sure. That's cool. I like that. Yeah, and I like your journey. I know that you said you worked at Jenny Craig, and obviously we can poke a lot of like there's obvious a lot of like problems with that. But
Mhm.
I would say maybe you can elaborate like how that helped you understand. It is a framework, right? It really gives people like here's what you eat, da 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 da, and just provided a framework that you were able to understand of a system. And like you say, from that you got to like a deeper essence of what people
Mhm.
really needed and supporting that with I'm not going to even say a Jenny Craig like program, but you know what I mean. It's like here's a
Mhm.
meal plan, here's this, but then here's this other piece, so the clients that you work with can go forward.
Say that last part again. You just cut out
Oh,
the
right.
very last part.
Right. So just providing those two elements, right? Like
Mhm.
here's kind of the meal plan, and you've done that in a real like upgraded way, and then like you said, kind of that soul part, right? The personal development and that type of thing. Both of those together.
Yeah, and so what have I discovered from the experience?
Yeah.
Oh man, so much, so much. Um, mostly what I've really learned is that it has nothing to do with the menu and nothing to do with the diet plan. So I never give that to clients. If that's what a client wants to work on, they I wouldn't be the person to work with them. This whole notion of deepening our connection with our environment and deepening our connection with our food is all about creating that space for self-care. It really is about learning how to surrender into the moments and be able to nourish just the very next step. And so I learned a lot working at Jenny Craig, like in those years. I learned a lot about the vast amount that goes on behind the scenes behind a food choice. And when I fast forwarded into my understanding of food allergies in the gut, which is my absolute favorite part of the physical body, um, when we remove the food allergens and when we get into a proper kind of groove with our eating, we cease to have these bizarre cravings and this insatiable hunger. But we have to go about it via that route. Otherwise, we're overfed and undernourished. And so it wouldn't matter the diet plan that we were put on if these basic fundamental things that the body needs are not addressed. So it was the other way of looking at it, of counting calories and creating a menu and creating motivation around eating the menu, is just so unbelievably backwards, and it's not sustainable because it's based on willpower, and food and self-love is not a willpower battle.
Right.
It's about learning to find our ebb and flow and to be able to respond to the things that we need moment by moment. And that means detoxing the system and truly getting rid of vices, all the vices, unhealthy relationships, unhealthy food, unhealthy jobs, getting rid of the things that are not good for us, and so that we can figure out how to come into our own flow. And once we're in our own flow, the body and the heart will dictate all the very next steps.
Yeah. Cool. Let's dive into what you're talking about in terms of the gut health and allergies. You mentioned you were it surprised you, right? That dairy, eggs. I can't remember the other food you had said that were really affecting you, not just physically. I'm sure things were showing up there, but psychologically even.
Yeah. So I remember growing up, I always had like a stomach ache. And it didn't start to make sense until the past couple of years as I've really worked on my gut health. But just looking back, and I just never felt good. And the first time I did a wild rose cleanse. That was my very first cleanse. And it was after I studied nutrition at SAIT. And from that moment, I learned that I had a dairy problem. And so I didn't eat dairy, like unless it was like on nachos or pizza or something that I really wanted, because it was okay to just have the stomach ache. It was worth it at that time. I
Right.
didn't understand the cascade of events that actually happened in the human body, and I didn't have the respect for my human body that I do now. And so then when I was learning from a naturopath here in Calgary named Dr. Joe Clausen, who was just like absolutely amazing. He specialized a lot in the gut, and so I became really interested in, oh, well, maybe there's something going on in here. And for me, I love moving into anything that has to do with self-care, I'll just go and do it because I want to experience it. And so I did the hydrocolon therapy a bunch in school, and I did my blood work to find out what my food sensitivities were. And at that time, I figured out that it was gluten, dairy, and egg, which was messed up because I was having eggs. I loved eggs. I mean, I was half vegetarian, so eggs were a super easy thing for me to eat. And bread, like toast and eggs, were my favorite thing ever. But I wasn't getting symptoms of like a food sensitivity or what we think of a food I didn't have diarrhea or constipation or anything that we would normally kind of associate with it. And once I started taking them out, I started finding out that the things, well, when I took them out and then added them back in, because, we do that a lot, because one of the symptoms of a food sensitivity is craving the food, which is I feel like it's such an evil trick of the universe, but it really tests us. It pushes us. And when I would add those back in, that's when I started experiencing, for me, it was a nervous system issue. So for me, it looked like insomnia, depression, really bad anxiety. And of course, now that I don't eat it, if I add it back in, I get really you can hear my stomach gurgling and there's digestive symptoms now. But it was very surprising. I didn't know that an imbalanced gut would affect the nervous system. And now, of course, it makes 100% sense to me now, but it didn't before.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, no, it's interesting, right? Like that we do crave those things that often aren't good for us, or it causes the most strife. So
Sure.
you've removed them. Have you been able to add them back in, or like you say, when you do, it's like, oh, okay, this is why I don't eat it, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I I miss eggs basically every day. And so about a year ago or 8 months ago ish, I tried to eat eggs again after not having them. I eliminated them 3 years ago now. And yeah, no, I can't. For a lot of people, they can heal their gut and add these foods back in on a rotational basis. But for some of us, we can't. And for me, I found in this process of becoming cleaner in my body, mind, and soul, I have become infinitely more sensitive to many, many things. And that includes the food sensitivities, that includes alcohol, that includes people, but it also includes the sensitivity to, I can intuitively create potions and things like that. So I've become overall more sensitive, and I can't really add these food sensitivities back in.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Well, sometimes it's a trade-off, like you say, as you develop those sensitivities, I mean, you're also more finely tuned to nature and to the moment and into yourself and your body. And,
Yeah,
there's lots of joy and pleasure to be had there for sure.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So you said you did some cleansing, obviously a kind of elimination diet, some colon hydrotherapy. Anything else that you've worked at or with that you found really helpful in terms of improving digestion and in healing your gut?
Um, well, fermented foods is a huge thing.
Yeah.
The basic things like adding in good quality fats and bone broths and fermented foods, digestion in terms of chewing our food and enjoying our meals. I think that we forget that a lot.
Yeah.
I would say that the way we chew our food is the way we live our life. It's a metaphor. And if we just we're wolfing our experiences down. And when we experience indigestion in the body, we're likely experiencing indigestion in our lives. And so the way we eat our meals is a huge metaphor for, or a window in, a peek into how we're living our lives. So that's a big one. I like using my golden fork philosophy of plating food. And I mean, it's helpful that I'm always taking pictures for Instagram, so I'm actually making it look nice. But we should all be doing that before we eat our food. It's an opportunity for reverence. So that was a really big one for me. And the other thing that's been really helpful in balancing gut and digestion is the psycho-spiritual work. So the therapy, the life coaching, the energy healing, because the mind and the gut are one and the same thing.
Yeah, that's cool. Did you grow up eating fermented foods? Was that something a part of your household, or something you got into later on?
No, it was something that I got into later on.
Yeah, it's amazing. Hey, I think that was definitely me as well, and I think probably a lot of people listening. I view it now as such a fundamental food group, and it's amazing how many of us didn't have that as a part of our everyday.
For sure. Well, I mean, I even look back into my first nutrition course, and that was at SAIT, and you didn't talk about fermented foods. Or in my years of working at Jenny Craig, we weren't talking about fermented foods. That was like, it was carbohydrates, protein, fat, and calories. That's all that mattered. So, fermented foods, I totally agree. It is its own important daily food group. We have to consume it.
Yeah. What's your favorite fermented food you like to consume?
Oh man, well, I've been addicted to kombucha lately.
Right. Yeah.
I learned this at the light cellar, the kraut recipe with a little bit of maple syrup and some seeds and maca.
Right.
I love
Nice.
that. That's really good. Kimchi.
Yeah.
I eat kimchi every day. I really like making dressings. Like I really like taking. I remember, I think so bizarre. There was the juice at the end of the kimchi, and for me it was like there's little tiny creatures in there. I don't want to throw it in the garbage, but you can't cook it because then it'll kill the little tiny creatures. So I started. That was when I started birthing this idea of crafting all these raw salad dressings and raw dressings for food. So I love crafting dressings with the like juice in a kraut or a kimchi.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So just taking oil and then instead of the vinegar, right, you use that kraut juice as the base.
Totally.
Yeah, and then yeah, so much flavor and like you say, full of fermented foods. I'll sometimes add like kraut or even kraut juice to like a soup. So you create your soup, you plate it, and then you just put some of that in, and it just adds that nice like sour element. So
Yeah, I love that.
yeah,
I love too the word sour makes me think of evolving our taste buds. So I always talk about this with people because when you're accustomed to eating these foods, we crave them and they're delicious. But when we're not and we're eating the standard American diet, from McDonald's to kraut is not going to be good. It's not going to taste good. But the body is designed to love these really herbal, natural, fermented, sour flavors. And so it's about evolving our taste buds. And if we were feeding a child, we would make them eat it a few times until they got used to it. They say it's like 10 times or something until we get used to a flavor. But once we become used to it, we really do start to crave it. It's amazing how the body is wired.
yeah, no, it is. It's phenomenal. And for anyone listening, I know you deal a lot with women. So if you're expecting a child or you're about to, they say a lot of that kind of preference for taste is developed in the womb. So the more kind of diverse, as parents we can get, the earlier on, the better. And if you've already got kids, and the earlier you can expose them to those different flavors, like sour. I mean, I grew up just sweet. That was my flavor, sweet, sweet, sweet.
Yeah.
Salty's okay. Love rich, creamy, fatty foods as well. But you're right, sour was something I had to develop a taste for. And bitter, I'm still working on. I like bitter, but only in certain amounts. There's a different dimension there in flavor and feelings and nutrients. So
Absolutely.
yeah. Cool. What? Let's get into elixirs and crafting these potions and this kind of thing. What can you share with us in regards to that?
Oh man, I could talk about making elixirs forever. I love making elixirs. It's an absolute fundamental it's moving meditation for me. It's like if all else fails in my life, or I was writing a book and in the summer and I had fallen into just a really dark place, because my mind loves to go into these really dark, like philosophical places. And for me, crafting an elixir will pull me right out of that and back into reality, back into real life, back into this moment. And this moment is all that actually exists. So food crafting for me it's not just about the consumption of the potion that I craft. Of course, that's also healthy, but it's the act of showing up. It's the act of going to my witch cupboard and picking out the potions that I want to use to craft this thing that is so much of the self-care process. I have on my stove, I need to get a cauldron, but right now it's just a pot that I call a cauldron, and I have reishi on the stove all the time. So I can always pull on that to use as a smoothie base or a soup base or an elixir base. And then I have, like, my office is filled with jars and bags, and my the person that came into my house, they would have no idea how to craft. Like it would just look like a bunch of weird herbs, but it's my favorite thing in the whole world to put these things together.
Yeah, cool. Well, and you've got your own social media, Kori Leigh, and then you've also got a new one you've created, Apothic. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so Apothic is my new little adventure. So I coach a lot of people, and women mostly, and I give them a recipe and I tell them what to do, and they're still just so overwhelmed with this whole food concept. And so I started thinking, well, maybe I should come up with a couple blends that rather than have them go and get the raw ingredients and be really intimidated by it, they can just take a scoop of this blend that's already made, put it in a smoothie, and make it really, really simple. And so that's kind of where Apothic was birthed. It's kind of the notion of a whole foods apothecary. One day when I study more herbalism, I would like to add in more of the herbs and things like that. But for right now, it's just whole foods. It's the stuff that's accessible. Anybody can get it. And just crafting magical potions out of things that people have in their house or will have in their house, because they'll have to learn about some of them.
Yeah. No, it sounds like a great place to start, right? You got those blends, and that's an easy way in. You know, you've been developing these relationships with these plants, their essences, their feelings, like you say, their story, and combining them, and then, you know, in a sense, right, like packaging it, giving it a label that transmits that essence that people can easily kind of identify with. And this is a great way to begin to kind of, you know, develop your relationship with things like reishi, go deeper with chocolate, you know, maca. What are these foods? What are their feelings, their flavors, their benefits? And then from there, you know, from those blends, you begin to explore the individual ingredients. So that's great. I really recommend anyone listening, you know, check out Kori Leigh on social media, you know, Facebook, Instagram, beautiful stuff. You know, like you say, making food art. You do that very well, especially elixirs. So always a great post every day. And I know another thing you do, which a lot of people love, is your ritual of self-care. You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the it's a telecourse. It's called the Course in the Ritual of Self-Care. And it's a 9-week-long telecourse for women. And oh my gosh, I love it. This current round has 72 women in it. And it's set up so we do 90 minutes a week, and it's all over the phone. So it's recorded. So anybody in any time zone can listen and re-listen to the calls. And each week, every woman gets a handout with some elixirs or some recipes. And then there's a private Facebook group. And so we do all things self-care. Every week we do a meditation, body scan. We always talk about something to do with nutrition. And then I always invite some kind of a coaching element into it. So boundaries, learning to say no, morning rituals, sleep hygiene, everything self-care is what it is. And then a lot of the magic happens in that private Facebook group, because I think women have been sort of trained to compete against one another and to not like one another. And I really, really, really believe in the power of gathering human beings and sharing stories. It doesn't have to be only women, men and women, men and men, women and women. Any human beings that share stories is just a super powerful thing. I just happen to work with women, and gathering the women in sisterhood for them to be able to share their human experience. So many women, I feel, in our day and age are busy trying to be strong. They're wearing all the hats and they're juggling all the balls, and they don't know how to find the strength in femininity and find the strength in softening. And part of that is sharing the story and sharing the human experience. And so that's what we do in the 9 weeks of A Course in the Ritual of Self-Care. It's one of my favorite pieces of work that I have.
Yeah, that's awesome. Mm-hmm. So share how people can connect with you. What's the best way for them to reach out to you, or just kind of, you know, see what you do and what you're up to?
Yeah, so I have my 2 Instagram pages, and I'm writing on there all the time. There's @Kori Leigh, and that's a lot more. It's some raw words in there. That's some real raw storytelling in there. And then there's @Apothic, and that's recipes, and it's all whole foods. And then both of those have my email on them. And then I have a blog, which is KoriLeigh.com. And that kind of has all of it. But Instagram is probably an easy way. And then there's Facebook, too. I'm Kori Leigh on Facebook.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll include that down below on the show notes. So, yeah, I wanted to keep it nice, short, simple. I felt like we've had a really great deep dive connecting into your world, how you perceive things, and thanks so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Anything you kind of want to leave us off with as a final sound off?
Well, it's the same notion that I always comes to my mind is finding divinity in darkness, learning how to be where we are at, knowing that where we are at is exactly where we are supposed to be. And we have a potential. There is a divine universal intelligence that is making a beat become a beat, and it's making our potential bloom exactly the same way. And so self-care is really all about diving into the moments at hand.
Cool. Well said.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for being on the call and sharing your journey, your story, and your wisdom.
Awesome. Thank you, Malcolm.